But today I wanted to do something maybe a little controversial. The doctor drama. I think there's probably nothing really more consistent on television than doctor shows. Certainly on YouTube, there's so many different YouTubers like myself who've done reaction videos to whatever doctor show that's on television at a particular time. But today I wanted to do something maybe a little controversial. I wanted to declare the greatest doctor show of all time. And to do that, I'm going to put up two juggernauts, Scrubs versus Grey's Anatomy. Now, most people watching my YouTube video are probably more familiar with Grey's Anatomy. It's been on for 18 seasons starting in 2005 and still seems to be going strong. But we shouldn't forget about a really important doctor show, certainly one that had an influence on my life, Scrubs. It was a comedy, started in 2001, and you'll notice a little bit of difference in the cinematography here as I show you the video. But Scrubs really focused on the experience of training from a lighthearted comedic point of view. And I think both of these shows try to give you a sense of what it's like to be in training as a doctor or a surgeon. And I think it's worthwhile really taking a look and saying which show better reflects what that experience is like to be a doctor. So why don't we dive right into it? I'm going to start with Scrubs, and we're going to compare that to Grey's Anatomy as we go along.
Since I was a kid, I've been able to sleep through anything. Storms, sirens, you name it. Last night I didn't sleep. I guess I get a little goofy when I'm nervous.
All right. I love this. So that first day of residency, I will never forget it. I was super nervous myself. I was starting in emergency medicine, and I can remember my very first patient and just how strange it felt to be a doctor, to make the decision. I had attendings and people like that supporting me, but it still was my patient, my decision. And that first person that you decide something on, or you're making the choice, it has a huge impact. So I could totally relate to this experience of day one, feeling nervous and just kind of pumped, like JD is here, totally pumped to be starting his residency. Let's compare that to Grey's Anatomy. I think the opening scene of Grey's Anatomy, if you remember it, is pretty telling of how the show is going to go.
The game. They say a person either has what it takes to play, or they don't. My mother was one of the greats. Me, on the other hand, I'm kinda screwed.
All right. Well, that tells you a little bit about these two shows, doesn't it? We have Meredith obviously had an encounter, probably, maybe a little bit of a questionable encounter with one of her attendings. And we don't know this yet in this show. But without a doubt, these two people would know where they're at. They would know that Meredith was a resident and McDreamy was the attending. They're human beings. They would know really what their status was. And I can tell you right now, if there's one way for you to end your career as an attending, that would be to sleep with an intern. That would be unwise. I would discourage you from there. But that just shows you really these two shows what you're gonna get. You're getting JD being silly on the morning of his first day, and you have Meredith waking up on her first day after she had slept with one of her attendings. So let's go back to Scrubs, and we're going to compare the scenes where the residents meet their chief for the first time, their chief of medicine in this case for the first time.
Okay, gang. I'm Dr. Bob Kelso, and I'm your chief of medicine. So I just want to encourage you all to think of me as your safety net, because I promise you we're a family here. Now then, Go get them, doctors.
All right, so he meets Bob Kelso for the first time, and Bob Kelso says, I am your safety net. We're a family here. We'll learn later in the show, though, that Bob Kelso may not be quite as innocent and as supportive as it seems. Let's compare this to Grey's Anatomy, though, where they have their very first encounter with the chief of surgery.
Each of you comes here today hopeful, wanting in on the game. A month ago, you were in med school being taught by doctors. Today, you are the doctors. The 7 years you spent here as a surgical...
All right, I just want to pause here for a second here, where you have Richard Weber. I love this, where you can see his credentials here. Richard Weber, MD, PhD, FACS, Chief of Surgery. So definitely flexing his credentials on his coat, maybe a little aggressively. Although we are proud of our FACS and our MDs for sure, and our PhDs, no doubt. But I just thought it was. I noticed his jacket. It's just absolutely just tried to flex.
resident will be the best and worst of your life. You will be pushed to the breaking point. Look around you. Say hello to your competition. 8 of you will switch to an easier specialty. 5 of you will crack under the pressure. 2 of you will be asked to leave. This is your starting line. This is your arena. How well you play, that's up to you.
Like I said, I'm screwed.
So he basically says, this is your competition. How you play is up to you. And I do think that these speeches do happen in medicine. I can remember my very first day on surgery. The chief of surgery came in and talked about us. He said, we think you're the best. We expect you to perform the best. We expect you to be in the top 25% nationally in all of your exams, which was pretty intimidating because I know how good all the other surgical candidates were in the other schools. And to be at that level was intimidating. So those speeches happen. But the last thing you want to do is characterize your fellow residents as competition. There may be an element of competition in the end for jobs, for certain positions, but the reality is that you need them. You need to be working together. The teamwork in medicine is so important. To characterize this as an individual sport in any way really falls out of line with what it means to be a resident and a doctor. So let's move on to Scrubs again, and let's compare Grey's Anatomy to Scrubs when the residents are learning a procedure.
Draining Miss Pratt's stomach fluid will get my spirits back up.
Shut up and do it.
Fantastic. Now just suck out the fluid with the giant needle. I think this needle's too big. I'm gonna get a nurse.
Come on, man. Learn by doing. Learn by doing.
Why couldn't I do that? I hated him at that moment.
Okay, maybe the needle was just a little too big.
Oh, you think?
What's going on?
All right, I love this idea of learn by doing. So it would be a bit unusual, again, to have 2 interns doing a procedure like a paracentesis on their own. There are risks to that. In fact, in this case, Turk actually put the needle clearly in the wrong spot. You never put it right at the top of the abdomen because in reality, the intestines would be floating in the fluid, and so you'd have gas and intestines rising to the top. So what you actually want to be doing is you want to go on the side. So obviously the showrunners felt that this was going to be more dramatic to put it in the front of the abdomen, the anterior part of the abdomen, and have a fountain, which I think is pretty funny, and I enjoy it. One thing I love about the scene is the attitude between internal medicine and general surgery is really displayed here. You have JD in internal medicine being a little anxious about doing this procedure, being super careful. And then you have Turk who's like ready to dive in. Hey, let's do a procedure. You need to learn by doing. And that's such a culture of surgery. Get in there, do it. That's how you're going to learn. And really, we are attracting people into our programs, and we want people who have that type of attitude. So let's compare that to Grey's Anatomy, where George is going to be starting a procedure for the first time.
Ligate, remove irrigated close. Open, identify. Ligate, remove irrigated close.
He's gonna faint. He's a fainter.
Nah, code brown, right in his pants.
He's all about the flop sweat. He's gonna sweat himself on sterile.
$10 says he messes up the McBurney.
He says he cries.
I'll put
Okay, so I'm going to pause it right here. Who has a theater like this in their hospital. My hospital certainly doesn't have anything like this. I've never seen it. So comment down below. I would love to see if you've trained in a place where residents can look above the operating field and see the patients having surgery.
20 on a total meltdown.
50 says he pulls the whole thing off. That's one of us down there. The first one of us. Where's your loyalty?
75 says he can't even ID the appendix.
I'll take that action.
Okay, O'Malley, let's see what you can do.
Here it comes.
Scalpel.
Like, I don't see how you could possibly see the surgical field from there. I don't see, there's really just no way that you can look down and, you know, see what's going on. It just doesn't make any sense.
That burr is trouble.
More pressure. Human flesh is a tough shell. Dig in.
Okay, I love that line, more pressure. The flesh is a tough shell. You have to dig in. So very often residents don't use enough weight on the blade and they just scratch the skin. And I point out this is a scalpel. It's a knife. It's meant to cut.
Pickups.
Pickups.
Clamps.
Clamp.
Metronome. I'm there.
Damn, he got the peritoneum open. I'm out.
I told you he's gonna pull it off.
Scalpel.
Scalpel.
Appendix is out.
Not bad.
Thank you.
Now all you have.
So what's happening here is we have a surgeon walking through a junior resident in a surgery, skin to skin. Now, comparing that to scrubs, you have a surgeon in the room directing them rather than two interns trying to sort things out. But it'd be very unusual for a surgeon to give an entire case on someone's first day to a trainee. Reality is you just get them step by step, because if something goes wrong, really, you don't know what their level of skill is at. You want to start with a simple thing. How does that cut go? Okay, maybe you'll close at the end of the case. All right, maybe I'll get you to tie one knot that if something were to go wrong, it would be okay. You slowly give them little bits of the procedure and build them up. That's not really what's happening here.
Do is invert the stump into the cecum and simultaneously pull up on the purse strings, but be careful not to break them. You rip.
So in this situation, he ends up tearing the cecum and there's spillage of stool. These are things that can't happen in an open appendectomy for sure. Again, this is a little different. Today we would, 9 times out of 10, actually 99 times out of 100 really do this procedure laparoscopically. It'd be very unusual to do it open. But again, this is 2005. Laparoscopic appendectomies weren't as popular as they are today, but really we would be approaching this laparoscopically for the most part. And again, we wouldn't be giving the resident a critical position or a critical part of the procedure on their very first day. So let's compare Grey's Anatomy and Scrubs one more time on how they deal with death and loss.
I need to see you in Mr. Bursky's room.
Are you flirting with me? You are, aren't you?
He crashed. The attending thinks it was a pulmonary embolism. No way anyone could have caught it. Anyhow, you have to pronounce him.
Why didn't anybody page me?
Could you just pronounce him so I can go home?
I'll never forget that moment. The way he looked exactly the same, only completely different. The shame that all I could think about was how hard this was for me. Time of death 0200. I just wanted to help people. The hardest part is how quickly you have to move on. Don't worry, man. You're gonna be fine.
So I absolutely love this scene. It's such a simple little perspective on what it is to be a junior doctor. It's very common for you to have to pronounce a patient that you've been taking care of early in your training. And like JD explained here, is that despite the tragedy and the investment you might have in that individual person, you really do have to move on. You really do have to move on to the next patient, because that person you can no longer help. And learning how to deal with that is extremely difficult. I can think of situations in my own training and career where we had multiple trauma patients and I was working on someone and they died, and then we immediately had to move over to the next trauma patient. And some of the paramedics or lay people like police officers who were watching us do that were shocked that we just immediately just stopped working on this one person and moved on to the next. The reality is we can't help the dead person anymore. There's no time for mourning or an emotional connection there. Although there might be value in that, we have to move on. And I think this really does touch that experience very, very well for a resident. Finally, I'm going to move on to Grey's Anatomy, and we're going to follow George again, and he'll be working with the same consultant here, and we'll see what happens.
I put you on a bypass machine, which pumps blood for your heart. Fix your ticker, take you off the machine, I'm done. Simple procedure.
So, I shouldn't worry?
I'm very good at what I do. It still is surgery. There are some risks. I'll see you in the OR this afternoon, Mr. Savage.
Okay, so I just want to comment really quickly on that consent conversation. So clearly this is an emergency procedure. They're down in the emergency department and they're having a conversation about this person's heart. He needs to get some sort of heart procedure. Not sure, it's not clear exactly what they're doing. But the surgeon very clearly says, oh yeah, we're pushing the bypass machine. We're going to fix you. It'll be quick, no problem. Very clearly is giving the patient a sense that this is very routine. There isn't too much to worry about. They're obviously quite anxious, and George tries to help out here.
You're here alone with that guy, are you?
Oh, I'll be outside the OR the whole time. No, Dr. Burke is very good. Don't worry. I'll see you after.
He'll be fine, right?
Tony's gonna sail through. You have nothing to worry about. Promise. I gotta go.
Okay, so that's a key part of this element, is that he said, I promise. Actually, I think George didn't do a terrible job there saying, look, I'm confident you're going to be doing well. I think maybe, again, this issue of promising an outcome is going to come up later, but I think it's a pretty reasonable way to calm a patient down, saying, I'm so confident in the surgeon that you have, I'm sure it's going to go great.
Wow, that was quick. His heart had too much damage to get him off bypass. I had to let him go. It happens rarely, but it does happen. The worst part of the game.
But I told Gloria that he would be fine. I promised her that.
You what?
They have 4 little
I'm
girls.
not allowing you to promise anything. This is my case. Did you hear me promise? The only one that can keep a promise like that is God, and I haven't seen him holding a scalpel lately. You never promise a patient's family a good outcome.
I thought...
You're important enough to make promises to Mrs. Savage? You get to be the one to tell her that she's a widow.
Okay, so this type of interaction between a resident and a consultant is not that unusual. I've had those interactions as well, because the reality is that the attending wants the resident to have the attitude of extreme responsibility when it comes to patients. The fact is, residents like this, like George, are young. They're 24, 25, 26 sometimes when they're starting their training. They're still developing as people, and part of surgical training is character building. It's about shaping someone into that person who's going to take responsibility for their actions. Now, I do think there's a bit of a misunderstanding here. George said, I promised that she'd be okay, and obviously his staff felt like that was inappropriate. If you really paid attention to what was happening there, I think the consultant would have been a little bit more understanding of what George actually communicated. Really, George wasn't promising an outcome. He was promising that he was in good hands, that the best care possible would be given. And I would say that the attending, Dr. Burke, was probably a bit cavalier in not explaining those risks. He really did make it sound to the family that this was a routine operation, that the the risk of mortality was low, especially mortality on the table. And so I do think that in a situation like this, especially since he was so cavalier with the family, that the attending really should be the one to be sharing this bad news. Again, residents do have to tell patients that patients have died, but when you're the consultant surgeon and there's an obvious complication, things clearly went differently than he planned, I think the consultant needs to have that responsibility, really show the example to George, demonstrate by doing what it is or how hard it is to share that bad news or tell the loved one that their partner died on the table. I think Scrubs and Grey's Anatomy are great shows. Obviously, Grey's Anatomy has been around for 18 seasons. But I do think that the effort to put additional drama in to appeal of medicine to the wider audience by causing tension maybe when there wouldn't be some, or making it seem like there's this constant array of tension and conflict, makes the drama show, in my mind, a little less realistic than the comedy show. In my mind, personally, I think Scrubs is the greatest doctor show of all time, and I think it reflects the experience of training better than any other show. Thanks for watching. My name is Dr. Rich Hilsden. I would appreciate any comments down below. If you think that Grey's Anatomy is a better doctor show than Scrubs, please let me know. If you agree with me, also let me know. I'd love to hear everybody's comments and their perspectives on these shows. Have a great day.